Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Anomalies. My name is Gwen Farrell. I'll be co-hosting today. And also my broadcast buddy, Dan Hall, is with me today. How are you doing, Dan?
Good. I'm pretty good for an old guy.
Well, we're glad to hear that. Glad to hear it. As always, we have some fascinating guests today. And we just want to again say welcome to Anomalies. This is a show about things that we don't always understand, but we're always find fascinating. And we always love to share them with our friends and our viewers. So let's talk a little bit about our guests and get introduced, and then we'll get started with the good stuff today. So our guests today are Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich. Arizona law enforcement officers who have a fascinating story to tell us. Marianne is a 34-year veteran law enforcement officer in Arizona, assigned as patrol officer and a detective in various positions. She is a MUFON, that's Mutual UFO Network, member, and she spent 7 years as a field investigator with that organization. She is an instructor at the annual MUFON Field Investigator Boot Camp and the MUFON Symposium, where she teaches MUFON field investigators how to apply methods that she learned in law enforcement to their UFO investigations. Our other guest is Dave Rich. He is a 25-year veteran law enforcement officer in Arizona. He started in patrol, then worked in the investigations unit as a gang detective, homicide and sex crimes and narcotics detective, and as a school resource officer. He is also a field investigator with the Mutual UFO Network and an instructor at MUFON's annual Field Investigator Boot Camp. Today, they're going to talk about some fascinating and lesser known aspects of their profession and the organization that they have established where law enforcement meets the unknown, the UAP-PD. We're really looking forward to hearing about that. They have some amazing statistics and some UFO investigations to share with us. So, Marianne and Dave, welcome to Anomalies.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're really
Glad to
glad
have you here.
with us. Yeah. So I think before we get started with the discussion, we want to make sure that everybody knows how to reach the UAPPD if they want to. So would you please give us the website of that?
Sure. We have a website is UAPPD.com. So it's UAP/PD.com.
Okay.
You can also get us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, UAP-PD on Facebook. There's a chat in there also, so we'd love to have anybody come on in and chat it up with other retired law enforcement officers or officers that are still working, and a lot of other people that are on the chat.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. Okay, thank you. So Dan, would you like to start with the questions?
Well, the first thing I'd start with is anybody who's listening to this, please like and subscribe to our channel because that helps us out. And I always forget to say that. So kind of the place I want to start is I used to work in law enforcement as well, but I was in corrections for 10 years. So not the same, but similar. So my question to both of you folks is why did you want to become cops? What drew you to law enforcement?
Well, on mine, I grew up in New Jersey, and at that time, I actually wanted to be a nurse, like my mom. Well, I moved out to Arizona back in, oh my goodness, 1980, and nursing wasn't as exciting as it was back in New Jersey. You know, it was a little bit more mellow here in Arizona. So when I was I was in junior high and we had a career day, and there was a police officer from the Mesa Police Department came and spoke to our class. And I thought this was really neat. And they had a program called the Police Explorers, which is what I call a junior police officer. It's from 15 years old until 21 years old. It's a great organization, and it shows if anybody wants to become a police officer, this is the best way to see, is this career for you? So at 15 years old, I started with the Mesa Police Explorers, and I worked my way up going on ride-alongs and doing all the aspects of law enforcement as just a kid, a teenager. And I said, this is exactly what I want to do. So I started at 15 years old and was a police aide to an animal control officer. And at 21 years old, 2 days after my birthday, I started the police academy. And ever since that day, oh my gosh, it's 34 years, just retired almost 3 years ago now. But it was the best thing that I could have ever done in my life. It was a great, great career.
Cool, Dave, what about you?
I lost a bet. I'm
You
just
lost a
kidding.
bet.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, we
I
want to
actually-
hear about that.
No, I actually come from a long line of police officers. My father, my brother, aunt, uncles. It's kind of like the family business back east where I'm from. The reason I moved to Arizona, though, is because I'm originally from upstate New York. And we get a lot of this stuff that we don't see very often here in Arizona. It's called snow. Way too much of it where I was from. So I moved out here and always knew I wanted to be a police officer growing up. Because again, like I said, dad, uncles, everybody was all police officers. So I moved out here and I ended up getting on with the police agency out here. But really, like, my main motivating factor is seeing what my uncles and my aunt and my brothers and everybody, what they're doing, just the opportunity to help people. And I know it sounds really cliche, but when you grow up around that and you see the impact that your family is making, you want to kind of spread that. You want to kind of see how many people you can help. And so that's how I ended up in it, just that desire to help and a family background.
So I have one more question. I'm kind of comparing experiences here. What did each of you learn about people in your work as a law enforcement? What did you learn about human beings?
That'd be an hour-long discussion.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
You know, I guess it would all depend on the year, whether what century it's in. If it's like I started police work in 1987, and people they loved the police department. They loved police officers. They were law-abiding. I found some really great people to work with, citizens, and also inside the police department. Over the years, people have gotten very bitter about things. And the law enforcement, what was I going to try to say is that the way they respect the law enforcement has totally changed to where it's not as friendly. And I've seen people get really bitter lately, and that's why I'm really glad that I retired almost 3 years ago. It really has changed since the day I started in police work.
For me, it's, more in spite of, because when Gwen read my bio, I spent time as a gang detective, a narcotics detective, a homicide detective, and a sex crimes detective. But in spite of all that, I think the one thing that I learned is that there are still truly good people out there. And those are the people that we do this job for, or what we did the job for, because I retired a year ago. And there's still a lot of officers that are doing it for the right reason. It's I hate to say it, but it's a pretty thankless job at times. But you do it because you're not doing it for the glory, you're not doing it for the praise. You're doing it because on some level, deep down inside, you want to help people. And in spite of the stuff that we've seen, and I know we've both seen some things, it's still just remembering that there's a lot of good people out there, and it's imperative to help those good people, because you can't just sit by and watch good people have bad things happen.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. So in your time of in law enforcement, and when you started to get interested in the UFO topic, got involved in MUFON, became field investigators, actually got hands-on and what they say boots on the ground kind of stuff that you were doing. Did your fellow officers know about this? Were you sharing your interest with others on the force as well? Was it kind of like something that you kept to yourself, or how has that evolved for you?
Okay, well, I'm going to start this one
Okay.
because it is totally day and night between the two. Okay. All of my guys that I work with in down south, Gilbert, we work for the Gilbert Police Department. Everybody was so supportive of me. I had Peter Robbins ride with me. I had Stacy Wright ride with me. Mark D'Antonio from Skytour Livestream ride with me. There is so many people in the UFO community that I introduced my team to. They all knew what I did. My commanders, my sergeants, lieutenants, they were so supportive of me and what I did. Now, what was cool is if we got a weird call, whether paranormal or maybe a light in the sky somebody saw, they contacted me. They knew I was MUFON. They let me handle that case because they knew how I was going to do that. I'm going to let him tell his side of the story, but I had the most supportive team and command staff that I could ever ask for. Now listen to his story.
Okay.
I had a little different.
You're on, Dave.
A little different experience. Let me put it to you this way. All the people listening at home, if you have a sibling, you know that like your brothers, sisters, stuff like that. It's the same way that a police department operates. You're almost like brothers and sisters because you're willing to take a bullet for these people. You're willing to do whatever it is. But just like your siblings, like I don't think I know of any siblings that haven't picked on each other once in a while. It's like that times 1,000. So the first moment that somebody finds that out, oh, it's a whole different experience. A lot of like high school type bullying almost. It's a different animal. And it's actually kind of part of what our presentation is that we do when we go out and do our presentations, because what we really do is what we really speak a lot about are the stigmas involved in law enforcement. And whenever you see something that's unexplained, the stigmas about why officers don't come forward and talk is really the crux of our entire organizations, where it kind of stems from an experience that I had and other experiences that other officers have had, where you can't really come forward because of a variety of different stigmas. And one of them is that we call it almost the band of brothers effect, where it is truly like that. Like you will get made fun of in the locker room. You'll get, they'll leave bumper stickers on your car. They'll, bumper stickers say like, I break for aliens, or I'm friends with Bigfoot or stuff like that. You get a lot of pranking and ribbing and stuff like that. And that's part of the stigmas, because that goes kind of to a level that's beyond what normally people would think of. And it is part of one of those stigmas that we don't come forward and talk about.
Yeah, I
caught some stuff.
Like I said, I had a lot of support. He did not.
But he's still with us and still active.
Oh yeah.
Now it's out of spite. Now I'm just doing it. I retired a year ago. They can't stop me. So
good. When I was a MUFON field investigator, which was many years ago, and I was only there for about 3 years, I was pretty tight-lipped about what I did, and I wasn't even in law enforcement, but I was in the legal field, working for conservative law firms. And that's something I really didn't talk about, especially when I started working with experiencers and listening to people who were talking about things that are usually considered to be nutcases. It was just, so I know for me, and I wasn't even in law enforcement, so I kind of can understand a little bit about where you go with that. But the fact that you keep going because it means a lot to you is the most important thing anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because of what happened to him, and he could tell that story later on, but what happened to him, that's why he said there are law enforcement officers out there. Everybody talks about the military, everybody talks about pilots. They kind of have some place they can go talk. But law enforcement and first responders have nowhere. Dave didn't have, he had nowhere to go. 6 years, all that stress built up. He had nowhere to go. And when he retired, he goes, you know what? we need to start an organization where we can help law enforcement officers, that what he went through for a good 6 or so years, we know there's other people out there and we want to help them. That's why we started this organization.
Yeah, the way that I kind of think about it is, imagine you saw something that you know with every fiber of your being, you really saw it.
Mhm.
And you get told by people that are in charge of you, you are not allowed to talk about it. If you talk about it, you're going to be in trouble.
Mhm.
And then you sit on it for 6 years. You can't say anything about it. You just have to kind of keep your mouth shut. And then you start analyzing why they're telling you you can't talk about it. And you start seeing all these different factors that come into play. And the more you look at it, the more you realize I need to keep my mouth shut. And you have nowhere to go. And your entire career hinges on the fact that you don't talk about something that deep down inside you know is true. And it weighs on you. It really does. It kind of eats you up a little bit on the inside. So when I retired, Marianne and I talked, and I was like, I guarantee you there are other officers, there are other firefighters, because we don't just speak to officers. Any first responder, I know that there are EMTs in an ambulance, firefighters on a truck, cops in a patrol car who saw something that they can't talk about and are afraid to talk about it. Now they have somebody that they can go talk to where they're not going to be judged. We're not going to tell everybody that what it is. We tell every time we get a story, if we're going to recount it in one of our presentations or something, we always get permission from that officer. We tell them flat out, I am only going to say what you are comfortable with me saying. If you don't want, because we have some officers that are still on the job that have come up and talked to us and said, I want to give you my story. I want you to get my story out there. You can't tell me my name. One guy just got promoted to sergeant. He's like, I can't have this out there. And so we basically took down all the information, and when we tell his story, we don't, it's just an officer with this police agency.
Mhm.
And so we always let the officer, the firefighter, whoever it is, dictate how much, because we have some that are like, yeah, you can flat out use my name. Do you need my picture? Do you need whatever you want? And it's interesting because there's something that I noticed about that, about which officers are willing to come forward and talk versus which ones aren't, as far as giving that information of, yeah, you can use my name. And a lot of it's kind of mirrors exactly what we're doing this for. And it all goes back to that stigma again. It's amazing how much stuff relates to those stigmas that we face.
Mhm. Great. If you read a lot of cases, not just through MUFON, but if you read them just in magazines and books and stuff like that, a lot of the people who see things are first responders. You constantly are reading stories about, there was a policeman who was in a squad car and it was 2 o'clock in the morning and he was, checking the back roads, and boom, it was there. And these things are just repeated over and over again. So there are people out there who are experiencing this. That's obvious even to just the public, those of us who read about this. So yeah, first responders, they're first responders. They're the ones who catch a lot of the stuff first. And so it's really good that you guys have that available for people now, not only because they deserve it, because they're human beings and they work hard, but also because we need it. We need it for the information. We need the investigation. We need to know, about what's happening.
I have
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
question for these guys.
Sure.
Are you guys familiar with OPUS?
I've heard of it, but I'm not totally familiar, though I've heard of it before.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Gwen, why don't you give them a little synopsis of OPUS, because that relates to this stigma issue that they're talking about.
I will, but I'll keep it brief because I want to hear a lot more from you guys. But one thing I was going to ask you is, when you speak with someone, when they come to you and they give you their information, what's your structure for dealing with that? What do you do with that? Do you have places that you can send that person to? Like, for instance, the ERT that MUFON has, would you utilize that? Do you send them to MUFON for investigations? Or where are you doing at this point with that?
this point, no, we're not getting anywhere. We are police officers. A lot of police officers won't talk to anyone outside the law enforcement realm.
Okay.
Like Dave said, I will take a bullet for him. I'll take a bullet for any officer that's
Mhm.
out there. We are brothers and sisters in blue. We trust each other. Police officers are not going to, if I say, oh, I'm going to get you hooked up with MUFON, they're going to
Right.
well, I don't know who MUFON is.
Oh.
I have a career that I am very secure about, and I want to make it, just stay in the background.
Mhm.
I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my credibility, because if it gets out to a MUFON member and it gets, say, into the MUFON journal, then that's just going to, in a way, discredit that police officer.
Sure.
So what we do is we tell the officers, what we try to do is meet them in person. If they're from maybe another state, if they wouldn't mind talk on the phone, that's great. We'll talk to them on the phone. We'll do a Zoom meeting, so at least they could see who we are. But most of the time we want to be in person, sit down with them, whether at my house or a private area, and just sit there, make sure they understand that everything they tell us, that we are going to just document ourselves. We are not going to give it out to MUFON. We're not giving it out to anyone else.
Okay.
We are there for them.
Mhm.
And again, they could either remain anonymous or be identified.
Yeah, a lot of it is based off of the trust aspect of it. Like we
Sure.
said, experience, I would have never walked up and talked to somebody about that experience that wasn't an officer. And it basically came from a lack of trust. And so what we try to do is we try to establish that trust. Now, that being said, we also have people that we work with in like hypnotherapists and therapists and people like that, that if somebody is struggling in that respect, we can refer them to, they know who we are, but we can talk to the officer about them and say, hey, we have some people that we trust if you want to talk. And we've mentioned MUFON in the past for people if they've seen stuff. And so far, we're not getting a lot of bites from officers that want to come forward and talk to it. For that very reason, we've literally sat across the table from them and they've looked at us and said, well, I'll talk to you guys, but I'm not talking to nobody else. No, that's not. But then when we approach the whole topic of, well, we have like some therapists, we have some people that could help you if you're struggling with the trauma of what it is, because basically that's what it is. It's a trauma of seeing something that you understand. And that's really what our big like core motivation was. If you were to say, what is the one motivation that started this organization? And I hate to say it, it's probably not going to be a popular decision or a comment, but it really wasn't to gather the information. It was to provide an outlet for these officers and these first responders so that they could start healing. The information that we gather just happens to be a bonus point for us to try and get that information. But when it really comes down to it, like if people were to come up to me and say like, hey, we need to get this information because this is an amazing story that this officer had, and we know that you know it. And I'll look at them, and if the officers told me, no, I don't want you to tell anybody else. I'm okay telling you. I don't want you to tell anybody else. Sorry, I'm not going to tell that story to anyone else. Because again, it all stems from that, like I am willing to take a bullet for them. I am also willing to listen to their story, help them heal, and keep their secret, because a lot of times they don't want it out because they're afraid if I go and tell MUFON or I go and tell some other organization, then it's going to come back to my agency. Now I'm going to have a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander going, what are you doing talking about something like this? You need to be quiet. And they're going to get called upstairs like I was. And that, I'll tell you right now, you don't want to get that phone call. You don't want to have to be told, hey, you need to come upstairs. You need to go talk to someone. And you sit in an office and you get looked at by people and they're looking at you like you're crazy. And they're asking you questions and they're telling you stuff and you're giving them answers and they're like, they don't believe it. And you're looking at them going, I have video, I have audio, and they still don't believe it. Again, it stems from that. So we have mentioned MUFON in the past with officers, but we don't have any, not a single one has told us, yeah, okay, I'll go talk to them now. They're like, no, 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 we'll talk to you. I don't want to talk to them.
And
Yeah.
another thing, we don't do just investigations. Like I said, Dave said, we want them to share their stories with us. We want that to give them an outlet to get that off their chest, get that stress off of them. If we can go to an area and do a reenactment and possibly something kind of mysterious just happens, more of a paranormal thing than a light in the sky. However, you never know. We will definitely do reenactments. We can go out and they can show us where this all occurred and we'll tape it. And who knows, it'd be great if something happened.
We've had some things happen.
But that's what we're doing, is that we're not just taking the story and, okay, we're gonna go do an investigation to see if this is like MUFON.
Yeah.
You know, is it explainable, or can this really be a UAP or something that's out of the ordinary? But
Yeah, it's kind of like our motivation. Like MUFON's motivation is to find the truth about what's out there. Our motivation is to help those officers, those firefighters, those EMTs, game wardens, park rangers start healing. Our secondary feature is to try and find what's going on out there on top of it. And we do share information with MUFON. Like one of our stories was a MUFON case that one of the investigators down in Tucson, she had a case where her witnesses were 2 EMTs and 2 police officers. And she started an entire investigation with MUFON and got absolutely stonewalled. They would not tell her anything. We went and did a presentation down in Tucson about our group and what we're doing. She came up to us after the presentation, was like, hey, I got this case. I basically hit a wall. When I got to the point where I was starting to try and ask these witnesses, they wouldn't tell me anything. So she gives us the information. We now have the full story, because when we went up, when Marianne went up there, they were more than willing to talk to us. And they gave us the whole story. And that's like a great example of where we kind of try to help MUFON out, because we were both field investigators, we're members of MUFON. So when we can, we help out. But again, it all stems from what that officer is willing to do. If he says, no, I don't want to share that information outside of you guys.
Right. Yeah, that's understandable. There has to be, this is a human thing that we're talking about, a human phenomenon. And it is, human beings are just who they are. And I think you have a group like MUFON that gets in there and investigates things with people who are willing to talk. And then they have the ERT for experiencers, and then OPUS, which is the organization that we work with now, which is the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. We work with contactees. And so we listen. Basically, that's what we do. We're very much like the way the MUFON ERT works, if you know how that works. But then you still have people who fall through the cracks, like your guys and gals in law enforcement. Where do they go? They're not going to go to MUFON. They're not going to come to us. So that's what you guys are there for. So it's important that people have that opportunity, to somebody to talk to, and that you understand that. You know, when this started out years ago, when the ERT was formed in 2007 or whenever it was, and then OPUS has been 30 years now since it was formed, experiencers didn't want to talk either. They didn't want to talk either. Now we are swamped because we're happy that we're swamped, but there are so many people who are sharing now. So you guys are, I can certainly understand where you're coming from with that. And I think that it's important that you put those limits on it. Yeah, okay, Dan, did you have another question?
Oh, no, but I appreciate that distinction between OPUS and MUFON, because they're not the same organization.
That's right.
So thinking about what you guys learned as police officers, what kind of transferable skills did you bring from law enforcement that helped you become a field investigator for MUFON?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of it, a lot of my investigation background came like direct. Like a lot of we teach a class on interviewing. and you can gain so much information from a good interview. Aspects such as like rapport building and following through and looking at body language and looking at body responses when they're answering questions and building that baseline reading for them to figure out, are they being deceptive or are they being honest and truthful? Or is it an emotional response from something that they saw that they can't believe? And so I think a lot of the skills that we used as officers, from even your base investigation skill of, never jump to conclusions, never automatically look at it as, oh, it's definitely a UFO. Now let me gather the information to verify that it's a UFO because it's coming of it the wrong direction. You want to come at it from the perspective of, let's figure out what we think it might be that's a rational explanation, a mundane explanation, and then rule those out, and through the process of elimination, come up with what's left. So I think I think what we provide is very important because it's remembering that mindset of an investigation. Because if you walk into an investigation thinking you know what the answer is before you do the investigation, then your investigation's already shot. You got to walk in with an open mind. You got to walk into it thinking, well, I don't really know what this is. Let's start running down the lists and start narrowing down what it clearly wasn't until we get to the point where, okay, this has got to be what it is because I've ruled out everything else. Here's where I stand. And that's one of the things that we kind of teach through that whole investigative process. Because we also do a little bit about evidence collection, things like that. And it's the same thing. The evidence collection, the same techniques that we use at a crime scene transfer exactly over to what you would do if you were ever at a scene where somebody says, hey, this is where I witnessed a craft land, or I encountered a Bigfoot or some sort of entity that I can't explain. A lot of those same lessons and same skills that we got taught as officers, and we even taught other officers, are transferring directly over to what we're trying to teach the MUFON field investigators.
Right. And like we talked about, the leading questions, how to ask a question, the who, what, when, where, why, how, all that good stuff.
Mhm.
But, and also the key, listening to key words that they might say or phrases that they might say to tell whether or not they're being deceptive. So we try to, give them some pointers on what to do, especially as you all know, MUFON's what 85 to 90% audio, telephone interviews than in person. So we tell them what to listen for when they answer a question to tell whether or not they might be deceptive.
Very interesting. Are these things that you find are fairly easy for, I'll use the term civilian field investigators to learn? Are they sort of on the complex side, or are they things that people can understand fairly clearly and can make use of them?
It's stuff that anybody can use.
Yeah.
Now, how easy it is to learn basically comes from how willing you are to listen. We've taught classes and we've had people that have like soaked it in like a sponge, and then we hear back from them a week, a month, a year later, and they're telling us, hey, I did this and I got this and I got this result and it was amazing what you taught me. And then we've had other people that we have done the same exact lesson, and they just walked up and said, I'm not going to waste my time building a rapport. I'm just going to go and get the information. And then we look at their investigations and they're garbage. And the reason for it is because the crux of any type of an interview is that rapport building, bridging those gaps. And it's multifaceted, and people don't understand that, is you're building a rapport not just to make it a comfortable conversation. You're using that as a barometer to measure how they react when you ask them a question that's like, hey, so what'd you do last night? Well, they got no reason to lie. Or like, hey, what do you like on your pizza? Or what's your favorite sports team? They have no reason to lie about that. So you're looking at how they answer those questions. And now you're getting a baseline reading for, this is what it is. Now when you start talking about the incident, if they're answering everything exactly the same way as they did when they answered, this is what I like on my pizza, then that's a pretty good indicator that they're probably telling you the truth. But if they answer completely different, you see body language shifts, you see inverted, like eyes averting, you get a lot of the ums, you get a lot of the preparatory phrases, you get a lot of the disjointed, out of line statements. Now all of a sudden you got to start looking. Now it could be one of two things, and that's what we try and caution them. Is it could be an emotional response to seeing something that was very traumatic, or it could be signs of deception. So again, it's a totality of the circumstances, but it's like trying to put together any puzzle. If you have a 1,000-piece puzzle, and I say, Gwen, here, put this puzzle together. Oh, but by the way, I'm only going to give you 100 pieces, and you got to put the puzzle together. Well, it's 1,000 pieces. There's 900 pieces that I'm not giving you. That's what we mean when we do these investigations, and you got to do a totality of the circumstances. It's a lot easier for you to put that puzzle together if I give you all 1,000 pieces. And that's what we try to do with the whole building the rapport, watching for the body language, watching for how they answer questions before that they don't have a reason to lie about, watching what they're doing, the totality of all of the circumstances. And that's what we try to teach these investigators. And their skills, and if they're willing to pay attention and they're willing to ask questions and get that down, they are very usable and attainable for a person who's not trained in law enforcement. You just have to be willing, and then also have the faith in your own ability. Because what a lot of times what we see is we'll tell them the stuff, but then people start to like doubt their own skills. Oh, I can't be right. No, you're probably right. You just got to be confident in yourself that you're taking this information, you're using it the right way, and you're going to get great results. It's just don't sell yourself short, because a lot of the people that we teach, they're very intelligent people. They know what they're doing. They know, they just need like a little bit of sharpening is what it comes down to. And that's what I think we're trying to do.
Yeah, fascinating. What would you say is the most valuable skill? Since we're still talking about field investigators, let's stay on this. For a field investigator to have?
The ability to listen.
Listening?
Listening.
You got 2 ears, 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you talk.
Mm-hmm.
And which is hard for me because I talk a lot. Jeez.
No, not Dave,
No,
no.
No,
Yeah.
but that would be, I'd say, the one skill is
Mhm.
that ability to stop and listen and truly listen.
Mhm.
Because and what I mean by that is don't jump to conclusions. Don't walk into the investigation thinking, I know exactly what this is. I'm just going to go through the motions because I know what it is. Because everybody who has ever done any investigation in their life has at one point or another, guilty of it myself, walked into an investigation, thought they knew what it was, and about halfway through the investigation went, oh, I was wrong. That's not really what it was at all. And then have to resuscitate your investigation at that point.
Yeah.
So
Another
Thank
thing
you.
is,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, just another thing is watch your demeanor. Now, like we said, don't jump to conclusions, but if you know, okay, it's Venus, so here we go again. Okay, let's listen to the person's story. You got to watch your demeanor, because not only are you watching their body language and their voice, they are also watching you.
Mhm.
As a police officer, first thing in the morning, I get 5 vehicle burglaries. First thing in the morning, I go to one house to another. Somebody left their car unlocked. A wallet was stolen, a purse was stolen, whatever. I walk in there going, oh, here comes number 6. Okay, so what was taken? Well, they're like, wait a minute. This is a traumatic event to me.
Mhm.
And this is the first time I'm talking to you. Even though it's my 6th one, you got to remember, this is a traumatic event for that one person. They
Mhm.
don't have no clue who you are, and they think there is the most important report that they are making. So investigators need to understand they got to treat that one person as if it was the first case they've ever done, not the 6th Venus sighting. And that's another
Mhm.
thing we try to explain to these folks that are learning.
Mhm. Yeah, that's all great information. And that works so much the same with what we do, those of us who work with experiencers, who are available for them, because we are limited in the things we are allowed to do with people. And yet, that's the thing. Listening, I'm not surprised at all that you said that. Listening is the most important thing. And then I think going with the flow is probably a lot of it too. And so, yeah, that's very fascinating, that it's so similar. in that. So what I'd like to ask you is if you would talk to us a little about some of the cases that you've investigated, or the things. I'm sure you've done 100 of them, and most of them are probably, well, perhaps not remarkable, but I'm sure there are also some that have really kind of like slapped you in the head or snuck up on you or made you think, what the hell? Would you care to share some of those? I know you may be limited to what you can do because of, security issues or things like that, but we would love to hear that.
I think the first one that we should do is his case.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Actually, before we talk, that'll be the second one. He does have another good one that is really good with
Okay.
a highway patrol. That was fun. So go ahead and go that one.
I gotta
Okay.
talk, this one has been blowing my mind since the trooper told us the story. And man, I cannot for the life of me figure this one out. Everybody thinks of Arizona as being a desert. It's all, oh, desert, it's always desert. We actually have a lot of high country here in Arizona, as you know. Up in the White Mountains in the wintertime, they'll get snow. Like, I know I was joking around, I moved out here to get away from the snow, but up in the White Mountains, they get snow that they measure by the feet. And this trooper was working patrol out there in McNary, way up in the White Mountains, middle of winter, snow everywhere. You're talking like feet of snow. And he responds to a car accident. And because it is still Arizona, it's a vehicle versus a horse. And the horse is dead, they think. So he's there. There's a White River PD guy there, and there's the driver of this car, this Mercedes, that ran into this horse, and there's this horse laying in the middle of the road. Horse isn't moving, so they're call a tow. It's simple car accident, vehicle versus horse, unusual, but still, it would be handled like a simple car accident. So he starts taking all the information down. They're looking at it. They're calling for a tow, waiting for the tow to get there because it's a while away. Well, all of a sudden, this horse that they thought was dead starts to jump up, tries to get up. The other officer that's there freaks out a little bit, pulls out his service weapon, and shoots the horse. Like,
Oh.
Really?
10
like
times.
10 times. So now this horse is dead.
Yeah.
The other officer freaks out, jumps in the car, takes off. So the only people left there now are the DPS trooper who's telling us the story, the driver of the vehicle that hit the horse, and now this bullet-riddled horse that is hit by a car and shot 10 times. The horse is clearly dead now. It's in the middle of the road. The DPS trooper is like, hey, I got to get the horse out of the road because, again, they always need to clear the road as quickly as possible. So he hooks up tow cable to the horse's body, drags it off into the side. Now, because it's McNary in the middle of winter, there's about 3 feet of snow on each side of the road. So it's literally just this 2-lane road,
Mhm.
and there's no other side streets, and there's this berm, probably because of the plow and everything like that. The berm is probably closer to about 4 feet tall on either side of the road. So he gets the horse off to the side. He pulls his vehicle up. Driver of the other vehicle jumps in his car, and they're sitting there waiting for the tow to show. So as they're, 20, 30 minutes goes by, now here comes, you see the yellow light, here comes the tow truck down the road. So the tow truck starts coming down the road. Officer sees that it's going to go and turn around, flip around so that it can pick up the vehicle that was involved in the car accident. And he sees that as it's flipping around, he's like, oh, it's going to run over the horse. That's right where I left the horse. So he jumps out of the car to go stop the tow driver from running over the remains. And the tow truck keeps on going and pulls up and starts to hook up. And he's looking, and the trooper tells us, he's like, I don't know what the heck happened. The horse should be right there. So he goes walking over to where the horse was. And what he finds, and now we're talking 50 feet behind his car. He walks over and sees the blood patch where he left the body. He sees the trail from the middle of the road where he dragged it over, and that's it. The horse is gone. So he starts looking. Berms of snow on either side. There are no footprints. There's no hoof prints. There's no tracks, no nothing. There's just the sliding over marks from where it is. He looks down the road. He looks up the road. There's no blood trail. There's no hoof prints on the side of the road. There's no hoof prints going off the road through the snow. No idea where this horse disappeared to. He's like, I know it was dead. It got hit by a Mercedes and then shot 10 times. I also know that I did not see it get up and walk away, and there are no tracks going away from the massive blood pool where he left it. So first of all, you got a horse that's exsanguinated because it doesn't have any blood in it. It's been shot, it's been hit by a car, and there's no tracks going in any direction from where this horse went. And so I'm just like fascinated because the first thing that jumps to my mind when I heard this story was all the cattle mutilations and stuff like that. Now you have cattle mutilations. It's like now there's a horse that's laying on the side of the road, 50 feet behind the car. It's not like he's gonna miss it. If it got up and walked away, he's gonna see it. There's gonna be some sort of track. There's gonna be some sort of blood trail. And there wasn't. It just vanished.
Oh, Sasquatch. Sasquatch.
No Sasquatch footprints either. There was nothing.
So,
Oh,
so
no
Dave,
tra-
Dave, connect those dots for me. Why did what happened to the horse remind you of cattle mutilations or
Well,
animal
just because of you would hear these stories of the cattle mutilations and Chuck Zukowski, who former police officer, investigates cattle mutilations. You hear so many stories of I was standing in the field working on something, looked over and saw all the cattle and they were fine, went back to working, 5 minutes later looked over and now there's one gone. It's like been, mutilated because he walks over because he sees it. There are so many stories of cattle like within earshot or eyeshot of people that went from being completely fine to having something done to them right there, and there's no trace, no evidence, nobody's, well, there's a carcass, but there's no, like, we didn't see anything flying around, we didn't see anything come running over. That to me, for some reason, clicked with that whole, I've heard so many stories about these cattle mutilations, and now we have this dead horse, and now the body's gone without any sign of what happened. And to me, that's what it jumped to my mind about the cattle mutilations.
Yeah.
This happened on the White Mountain Apache Reservation. So can there be a little correlation of it being on an Indian reservation too? Don't know. So that's what's kind of unique also.
Were the White Mountains, was that the area that Travis Walton had his abduction in?
It is. It's a little bit further east.
Okay.
Where he was in Springerville, in the Heber area. Not Springerville, but the Heber Overguard area. This is probably about 60 or so miles east. 60, it's past Sholo and Pine Top Lakeside.
So it's close, but not super close, 60, 70 miles away from where Travis had his sighting.
But that whole area is the White Mountain Apaches Reservation, that whole general area. Our story happened and where Travis was abducted.
And so what was the time length between dragging the horse to where he left it and finding that it was not there?
About 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So really no time for somebody to come and,
If somebody drove up in a truck, it was 50 feet behind, he's going to see it. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's
okay.
I find fascinating.
And it was late at night, wasn't it?
It was nighttime.
And it was also nighttime. So even if, any kind of headlights, somebody came, flashlight, whatever, you would see anyone go near that horse.
Wow. That's a.
So Gwen used the magic word there, kind of involuntarily, maybe. Sasquatch. Have you had any Bigfoot cases involving Bigfoot that you've looked into?
Well, we got the one footprint in White River.
Yeah, that was a while ago. We haven't been able to contact that police officer though yet. We have a skinwalker case, but we don't have any UFO, any Sasquatch, any Bigfoot case.
However, there is a Sasquatch that supposedly roams around that area called the Mogollon Monster.
Oh, is that true?
Yes,
I'm going to write that down. The Mogollon Monster. Okay.
Yeah, if you Google the Mogollon Monster, there's stories about it on the internet. We just
Okay.
have not heard any stories from any officers or
Mhm.
anybody about that
Mhm.
specific creature.
Mhm.
But the Skinwalker story is fascinating.
Oh,
Yeah, tell
yeah,
us that one.
we'd love to hear that one.
Okay.
That's all yours.
Well, we have an investigator that contacted me. He was also worked for the same agency I did. And we're going to call him Noah. He didn't want to be totally, he gave us his first name, but doesn't want to give his last name or any further information. But Noah is a very serious guy. He doesn't really joke around much. So a couple years ago, he got with me and asked me, he knew I was with MUFON. And he says, can I tell you a story? I said, sure. So this happened in 2019. He was driving up toward Page, Arizona from the Flagstaff area. There is a 2-lane road from Flagstaff to Page. It's called Highway 89. And all it is a 2-lane road. It's darker than dark. There's no street lights. There's no houses. It's on the Navajo reservation. So as he's cruising up the road, it's about 10 o'clock at night. So he's kind of going pretty quick. There's no cars or anybody around. He starts going up to this one area and he sees this, an object. He sees this kind of creature that's on the right-hand side of the road. Well, he starts slowing down because he's thinking maybe a dog or a cat, or not a cat, but a dog or a coyote or something that could be about to cross the road. He starts slowing way down, and this creature on all fours slowly crosses the road in front of him. Now, this creature is actually looking at him as it's crossing from his right to his left and going across the roadway. I asked him, well, how big was this creature? He said, at all fours, the top of his back, it was about approximately 4 feet tall. And this thing just nonchalantly walked across the road. No sense of urgency. So Noah starts going again. Now his heart's beating a little bit faster. And he's like, okay, I think I better be cautious because I don't know what is out here. Goes approximately 2 more miles. This time he's just past the turnoff to Tuba City. As he comes up, he sees something in the middle of the road this time, right where the lanes were two solid yellow lanes going in the middle of the road. So he starts to really slow down to maybe 30 miles an hour. And he's like, what in the world's in the middle of the road? Well, all of a sudden he sees a creature now sitting on its back hind legs and sitting up. And it is sitting there in the middle of the road. And as he's slowly going past this creature, the creature is actually watching him from when it approaches all the way, and he watches the car go all the way past him. And Noah's like, what in the world did I just see? So he was thinking about being an investigator. I want to go check that out. So he wanted to flip a U-turn in his car, but he knew both sides of the road are very soft shoulders. So he decided, I'm not going to do that. I need to go to an area that has light, people, and, just kind of wake up here, see what the heck's going on. So he keeps going, drives into Page, finds a grocery store or a convenience store, and goes inside. As he gets inside, he sees a Navajo woman behind the counter, the clerk. She's happy, hi, talking to people and joking with them and doing everything behind the counter. Noah goes, grabs a couple of snacks and a drink, goes up to the counter, and she's all bubbly. Hi, how are you? Where are you coming from? Where you're going? And he goes, can I ask you a question? And she said, sure. He goes, do you have any coyotes or wolves in this area? And she said, well, I do have a couple of coyotes every once in a while, but the terrain in this area is not conducive for wolves. I mean, this area is all rocky. It reminds me, if you look at Mars, this is the kind of the area, it's just desolate. And she goes, well, why do you ask such a question? Well, he told her the story of what he just encountered twice. She went from a demeanor of being bubbly and happy to very serious, very calm, very quiet. She bagged his groceries, handed it to him, says, you need to leave the store now. He goes, I had no idea what this was all about. he goes, can you, look into this for me? Well, I said, sure. So of course, both Dave and I know John Dover, Stan Milford Jr., and
Rangers.
Navajo
Mhm.
Rangers.
We know them too.
I got with them and I called, I says, guys, and I told them the story that Noah told us and how the demeanor changed from the Navajo woman, the clerk, goes from very bubbly to very serious all of a sudden. And he says, well, Noah saw Skinwalker. And I'm like, okay. He says, in Navajo culture, that you don't talk about a skinwalker or shapeshifter ever. Maybe the SW, you only use initials, but you sure is all get out, never talk about them in the middle of the night when it gets dark. And why she was so serious and wanted him ushered out of the store as quick as possible is that she's afraid that if he kept talking about it, he's going to leave that evil spirit with her in that store. And she wanted it, just be gone. So, of course, 2019 being dark, even if he had a cell phone, he's not going to be able to take pictures of this creature that he saw. Now, one thing about that, I asked when it was sitting on its back hunches and looking at him, this creature, as he drove by, I said, how tall do you think it was from sitting down to the top of his head? And he said over 5 feet. And that's sitting down.
Hmm.
So I asked him, I said, since he had no pictures, I said, would he be willing to speak to one of my sketch artists that I knew? And as you know, sketch artists usually do for victims. If we don't have a photo of somebody, a bad guy, they can actually do a sketch of the person. Well, Noah says he talked to our sketch artist that we have. And he did. And after about 20, 30 minutes, the photo, and I don't have one with me. I wish I did have it for you, but looking at the photo, it looks like it's a wolf / coyote with this angry face with these fangs, and it had elongated jaw, and it kind of had I like saliva or something in the mouth area. It looks cartoonish, but it's not. It's exactly what he saw. And to this day, he said the same thing. He says, I don't know what I saw, but it was a very shaky, it shook him up tremendously with this story. But that was, he did see a skinwalker, and I'm so glad he wasn't able to turn around and go do an investigation. Don't know what would have happened if he encountered it.
Now, that's the kind of thing you definitely don't want to encounter when you're on the job at night, wherever you happen to be. Yeah, so fascinating stuff. Did you have any other question you want to ask, Dan? We don't want to keep our guests too long today.
Well, I've got kind of an abstract question. I don't know if I should ask it or not. So if I ask it and you think it's too abstract, just say, hey, let's talk about something else. So in another lifetime, besides working in corrections, I used to be a sociology teacher. I taught sociology for 16 years, community college system in Washington State. And one of the fascinating things, and it pertains to all the stuff we're talking about, is reality. What the hell is reality? So what have you guys learned about that? Being your UAP, UFO investigations, the Skinwalker story, what have you learned about what the nature of reality is?
That is a really interesting question. The way I would answer it would be this. Reality is not what I think we think it is. Okay, the reason I think this way, if we've got a few moments, I was a hardcore skeptic before my first incident, but then I reflected back on things that happened to me as a child and as a younger adult. And I realized that I had experienced things that I had always been able to kind of come up with an explanation for that didn't always fit. I was jamming square pegs in round holes to come up with solutions because clearly this couldn't be what I thought it was. Because at the time I thought it was something else. And I was like, no, no, that's ridiculous. There's got to be a logical explanation. So I did a lot of square pegs, round holes. And then when I experienced the first one that I encountered as a police officer, and we did a whole investigation into it, and I had video evidence and I had audio 911 call about it. And I do this whole investigation, and through my entire investigation, I'm left with something that I'm scratching my head going, I have no explanation. That was when my reality, I think, shifted. Because all of a sudden now I'm looking back at things that I experienced as a kid and as a young adult. And when I'm realizing I was jamming square pegs in round holes then. Because now all of a sudden I'm starting to realize reality is bigger than what I thought it was. Because I think everybody has their own concept of what is reality. And some stuff is reality, like gravity is reality. You jump off a building, you're gonna go down. But what you believe you see and what you think you see and what you might really see may not actually be the same for each person. And and I know this sounds weird, you said abstract, I'm answering abstract. Because since we have started this, we have gone on some investigations, and I'm seeing it with a different, like through a different lens now. And I'm seeing things that have happened that we have gotten video evidence of, and we have gotten other evidence of, that previously I would have kind of tried to force that square peg through the round hole again. But now I'm kind of stopping and going, no, I think I really saw that. And I do struggle with it still. We had a thing in December that we went out, it was basically a follow-up to some Gila River PD guys that were talking about this particular mission on the reservation, where they gave us, there was 3 of them, they gave us 6 stories. 4 of the 6 stories all had to do with this one mission, something right around there. So we went out and did a night investigation, and I know we're running out of time, but I saw something that caused me to, and we got something on video, and I talked to John Dover about it, and I got a very eye-opening education from him about it just a couple weeks ago when we talked about it. So in answer to your question is, my reality shifted dramatically over the last few years. So I don't know if that's an abstract enough answer for you, but that's what I have discovered about reality right now.
Marianne, how's your reality doing these days?
Doing great. Doing great.
Great. I think that we never stop growing, and we never stop, our reality never stops shifting. Otherwise, I think it might be kind of a boring world. So well, we really want to thank you guys for coming in. We would love to have you come back and visit with us another time, whenever you're doing a little bit more with your organization, and maybe you've got some things planned and some things that you'd like to share. We would love to have you. And we want to make sure that we thank you for your service as police officers. And we've had a really good time here today. So I think that's about all. Dan, did you have anything else that you want to say?
I just was kind of interested in the cattle mutilation side of things, because I've always found that to be an interesting topic, but I've never been able to find anybody who would talk about that. I think, Dave, you mentioned somebody that you know who was an officer that had investigated cattle mutilations. Do you think they'd be interested in talking about that on a podcast?
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Chuck Zukowski, he was, I'm not sure if he's still with MUFON or not, but he's out there. He was with the Sheriff's Department in Colorado.
Could you possibly let me know how to contact him?
Yeah, that would be great.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
We can go ahead
Thank
and try
you.
to find that out.
Yeah,
But,
thank you.
Also, real quick, is that we will be at the MUFON Symposium in Dallas in July. We're
Right.
going to be again at the MUFON Field Investigator Training. And we're also going to be presenting UAP-PD on Sunday morning.
Cool.
Great. Okay.
So
Were
if
you
anybody's
guys
out
at,
in Dallas?
were you just at Contact in the Desert? Were you there this year too?
No, I was there with Mark D'Antonio with Sky Tour live
Oh,
stream
okay. Mm-hmm.
in our observatory, but not UAP-PD. Hopefully, maybe next year. But we will be on. We've been invited to be on Coast to Coast
Wow,
cool.
cool. Okay.
soon. They said it'll probably be a few weeks from now. So,
Yeah.
but we'll be on there, and that is really awesome. We're excited about that.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much again. It's been great to see you guys and to hear
Nice to
about
meet you.
this exciting stuff that
Thank
you're
you.
into. And we want to just say God bless, take care, and we hope to
Be
be
safe.
talking to you again before long. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Uh-huh.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.